Last time, we asked how writer Nigel Kitching and artist Richard Elson could adapt Sonic the Hedgehog 3, knowing that they only had half of the source material. The answer was fairly simple: to play it safe, base their adaptation in Sonic the Comic's own established lore while making a couple of assumptions, but including very little from the game itself. That changed once Sonic and Knuckles released, and the duo had access to the full story. The pair locked in, including a ton of our favourite moments from one of the best Sonic games ever made, and in turn, penning one of Sonic the Comic's greatest arcs. Before we begin, I want to make one thing very clear. I love this book, and I'm eternally grateful to its creators. Sonic was my gateway into both video games and comics. I likely would have never self-published indie comics, started developing indie games, have been at the Comic-Con where I met my wife, or be 10 years into a digital design career without Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Mega Drive and Sonic the Comic on my newsagent's shelves. I have the original artwork for page 3 of issue 50's main story hanging above my desk as a constant source of inspiration. That said, I am here to review and critique the comic. That means we're going to get granular. We're diving into the weeds, and it may seem like I'm nitpicking at times, but that's also a testament to the quality of the work. I have to dig deep to find any flaws, and I'll be heaping plenty of gushing praise on this arc too. I've been lucky enough to meet this particular story's writer, Nigel Kitching, and artist Richard Elson at multiple conventions over the years. They're both really friendly, down-to-earth, and approachable. They've also watched and responded well to my past videos on Sonic the Comic, so I can promise you they're not offended. If anything, they're happy to talk shop at length. They know this comes from a place of love and respect. Right, let's not waste any time and jump straight into issue 45, Day of the Death Egg. We established that, like the games, there was a gap between the releases of the Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles arcs. Issues 39 to 44 set a tense status quo where the Death Egg served as a looming threat that was actively undergoing repairs on the floating island. It was a ticking time bomb that Sonic and the Freedom Fighters were keen to disrupt, resulting in one of my favourite two-parters, Badnik's Bridge. However, their efforts could only delay the inevitable. Issue 45 shows us that eventuality with the Death Egg launching and attacking the Emerald Hill Zone. First of all, shout out once again to Dan200 for these gorgeously remastered pages. These videos would be much more difficult to make without them. Kitching and Elson open by showing their mastery of pacing a page. The launch is an event we've been leading up to for 6 issues across 12 weeks, so they take their time with it. We slowly step back as each stage is complete and the Death Egg's anchors decouple. It gives the satellite an imposing sense of weight and scale. If I were to be overly critical and nitpicky, when have I ever been known to do that, I would change this 4th panel. It breaks the line of visibility and sense of motion. We go from viewing it on the ground and stepping back, to suddenly being above the Death Egg. I've done an inelegant edit using the original assets to instead see what it might have looked like had we craned our necks back and followed the Death Egg into the sky, which I feel is an improvement from a layout and visual continuity perspective. This would also allow the 5th and final panel to feel like we've flown to catch up with the vessel, or at least bought some incredibly powerful binoculars. In the original, this is another camera change and goes against the consistent distancing, but the speed lines and falling smoke trails do give the panel a fantastic sense of velocity. Having this 5th panel here also allows our page turn to reveal a gorgeous full page of the Death Egg blasting through the sky. The colouring is spot on here, with the white hot heat of the thrusters reflecting off the Death Egg's steel body. Even the Soul Cloud in this scene has an orange and yellow underbelly to emphasise the power of this explosion. It's also a great example of how Robotnik's creations are drawn throughout Sonic the Comic. The forms are generally asymmetrical. The panels are a mismatched mess. It looks cobbled together, but with purpose and intent, as manic as the Doctor who put it together. It's a wonderful way of characterizing our villain through his machines. We then see Sonic and Tails fighting off some badniks. There's not much to say here other than it's another nice example of Sonic using his brains in the environment while trusting in his allies, instead of brute forcing his way through every fight. There's also a nice contrast between the overall cheery nature of this scene and its final panel, where Sonic and Tails are suddenly bathed in shadow. It's ominous, and it makes us curious to turn the page. Just damn fine work all around here. We continue to build up, with the Emerald Hill folk assuming the Death Egg is just an eclipse. We slowly get hints of the Death Egg's mustache silhouette, its menacing glowing red eyes, and then BAM! It attacks. I don't know about this page, it should be a big moment, but it falls a tad flat for me. The fifth panel interrupts the fourth, taking emphasis and focus away from the destruction. Its speech balloon could have easily been placed in panel 4. It also shows us that everyone's okay, which, yeah, we could argue kids comic, but well, we'll see shortly. Still, it undermines the beam's power. We also have this duck character looking straight at the audience who, for some reason, reminds me of James Pond, the mere mention of which probably just unlocked some memories, featuring a borderline slapstick pose that warrants a Looney Tunes oh dear sign. It's tonally inconsistent, and we're left unsure how to feel as readers. On the plus side, the flow of this page is masterful. Our eyes know exactly where to go. The growing black spear of the Death Egg stands out and grabs our eye. The Emerald Hill folk get smaller and shift into silhouette, with Robotnik's weapon popping out of the fourth frame. Its eye-beams leading us down to its victims, and the split-apart ground then carrying us across and into the final panel. Take notes, aspiring artists. This is why page composition is important. This is how you create a fantastic and intuitive reading experience. Sonic approaches and challenges Robotnik. Take a look at how this is framed. Sonic's relative size to the Death Egg, paired with the angle that subtly exaggerates that difference, is basic but effective visual storytelling. This is the show don't tell principle on display. We know, at a glance, that our hero is hopelessly outmatched, yet he's not going to back down. The next two panels are odd. Tails flies in, but his eyes are drawn as if he's Knuckles. Tails has never had the monobrow, his eyebrows have always been separate. Granted, he spends most of his time looking happy or concerned, so it's hard to find another shot of an angry or in-battle Tails for comparison. Anyone who has watched my previous Sonic the Comic videos, you have watched them, right? Will know what I'm about to say here. Speech balloons are read left to right, top to bottom, yet here the top one is on the right and the bottom one is on the left. It's confusing as to who speaks first, and that harms the reader experience, albeit a minor bump in the road. What happens next shocked everybody when this issue first came out. Tails takes the full brunt of an attack from Robotnik and is seemingly killed. The look in Sonic's eye and the misty vapor matching the beam's colour implies there's not even a body left to bury. The choice to not give Tails an outline and to only convey him in the colouring really sells the idea that the fox is in the beam too. And if we think that's too dark for a licensed children's comic, the next page doubles down on what just happened, removing any ambiguity. Robotnik, you murderer. Tails was only a kid. Yeah, they not only went there, they made a point to remind us of Tails' young age too. Sonic leaps into action in a slightly confusing panel. We follow the speech balloons down along the left side, meet Sonic's dust cloud, and then follow his motion trail to the Hedgehog, leading us back into the first bit of text. This creates a cyclical eye flow without an exit point, which is perfect for traditional art, but counterintuitively prevents readers from moving on to the next panel. This might be one we could improve by simply flipping the panel, so we start with Sonic, go into Robotnik's dialogue, and then exit into the next vignette. It's not a perfect solution, as the bubbles still arc away from the next panel, and the rising smoke beneath the Death Egg still takes us down to Sonic's dust cloud and motion trail, forming the loop, but it is a tad cleaner. Before Sonic's attack can connect, Robotnik fires again. This might be a small panel, but it's also one of the most impactful in this story. We essentially have three colours: red, white, and black. Fine, and a little bit of grey. There is nothing except the death egg and the destruction this mechanical monster unleashes. It is one of the most sinister, yet understated panels in STC's entire history. The next shot is the polar opposite, being a piece of art that draws a lot of attention and praise as Sonic gets hit. We can really feel the intense heat this thing is putting out, as Sonic's shoes and gloves melt off him. Elson uses high contrast, with the beam being pure white in the centre, surrounded by black at the edges, to laser focus, pun intended, our attention while pushing the perceived brightness of the beam. We turn the page to see nothing. Just a black panel with the words, "It's finished." That's chillingly cold. The comic takes a moment to pause and makes us digest what we just read. Robotnik's right-hand man, Grimer, hits the lights to reveal that everything we've just seen has been a simulation. The comic even winks at us, with an editor's note saying, "You didn't really think we'd let anything happen to poor Tails, did you?" While this may not have been a real attack, we do get confirmation that the Death Egg's main thruster has arrived and an actual launch is imminent. Anyone who thinks that the adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog Robotnik can't be taken seriously or look menacing should drink in this final panel. The Mad Doctor is glaring at us while grinning ear to ear, the lighting and destruction that he's about to cause. We again see Elson play with contrast, as we see whites on the tips of the villain's thumbs and the bottom of his mustache, accompanied by thick black shadows that imply a harsh underlight. This is a great example of how shading can convey someone's character and intent. What an issue. While they may have pulled a psych at the end, we still saw a children's comic attack an innocent village, kill a child protagonist, and then murder the lead character. It is an amazing display of power that reminds us of the stakes. A lot of people skip this issue, believing the Sonic and Knuckles arc starts with issue 47's Mystery of the Sandopolis Zone, and I strongly feel they're missing out. At the time of publication, it had been months since the Sonic 3 arc had concluded. The Death Egg was a background threat that might be easy to forget about. This story resets our expectations, making the danger current, real, and insurmountable. We come out of this issue knowing one thing: Sonic and the Freedom Fighters urgently have to stop this launch by any means necessary. The dial has been turned up to 11, and an amazing new arc starts right now. Except for issue 46's A Big Con, which we covered last time, but for now, let's conveniently ignore that. Issue 47 opens with Sonic and Tails flying back to the floating island. Sadly, this opening page isn't Elson's best work. The reveal of the island itself lacks the grandeur we saw in the Sonic 3 segment, showing us very little of Knuckles' home. Issue 33 was 28 weeks or around 6 months ago. There would have been benefit in re-establishing that sense of scale and wonder. Sonic hops off the tornado, leading us towards the final panel. However, we're experiencing a lot of viewpoint changes. While the camera never breaks any rules, staying on the same side of the biplane throughout, we go from a 3/4 slightly elevated front view to a 3/4 sunken back view, and then we climb again to overlook the vehicle once more. All the time, our distance from the duo is constantly shifting. It also results in Sonic landing in the wrong direction. Our eyes need to reach the bottom right corner, but everything about this pose and its action lines directs us to the bottom left instead. I believe Elson was between a rock and a hard place here, as he either needed to cut the camera to allow Sonic to jump from the other side of the plane, breaking continuity of motion between panels 2 and 3, or flip panel 4, which again introduces a jarring change for the reader. Richard picked the lesser evil, but time permitting, this entire page likely needed revisiting and replanning. I also have bad news for Tails fans. This is all we'll see of the Fox in this story. Sonic says his mission calls for speed, and he doesn't want anyone slowing him down. It echoes the fact that Tails isn't playable in the standalone release of Sonic and Knuckles. we can only access him via locking on Sonic 3, and it allows a greater focus on the dynamic and banter between Sonic and Knuckles, something I greatly enjoyed throughout this arc. Sonic quickly scouts out the Death Egg, which, like the island itself, doesn't get a big reveal. It's contained in the smallest panel of the entire page. Perhaps Kitching and Elson felt that issue 45 already placed enough emphasis on the looming threat of the Death Egg, and that it had successfully left a lasting impression on the readers. It's interesting that the Death Egg is visible from Sandopolis, and I'm presuming that's Marble Garden in the far background. When we think about Sonic's journey through the game, it makes sense. We venture into the pyramid, seemingly going deeper underground, and emerge in the caves of Lava Reef. From there we can see the Death Egg sitting atop the volcano. It makes sense that elevated position would be visible from the desert. The comic follows the same flow of events and locations, but with one change. In the comic, Sonic never prevented the Death Egg's takeoff in Launch Base, so it never crash-landed on top of this volcano. Instead, Sonic the Comic's lore has Launch Base intentionally built into Lava Reef's mountainside, which just makes Robotnik seem all the more unhinged. Sonic's goal is ambiguous. He says he can't let Robotnik finish repairing the Death Egg, but if this was an assault, we would assume he would bring the whole crew. Is this a recon mission? The Hedgehog doesn't get time to elaborate, as a sandworm which, fun fact, I learned is different to a caterpillar while writing this video, attacks from underneath. We've got some nice anticipation in the preceding frame, as the ground shakes below our hero, helping to push the impact of the strike. The colouring is lighter on Sonic, possibly to reflect how video game sprites often flash when taking damage. The robot itself is in a straight, rigid, tense line to imply strength. This definitely hurt. It swings back around for another attack, and wow, look at the size of that thing. We get some really nice follow through with Sonic being knocked into the next panel. It helps the page flow nicely. Knuckles is then reintroduced with a fairly throwaway line that I still don't understand. Yes, Knuckles did tell Sonic to stay away from the floating island at the end of issue 42, however, Sonic's proven himself to be an ally on multiple occasions, fighting alongside the Echidna against a common enemy. Maybe that's why he doesn't press the issue, and the two enter into friendly banter, something that will continue throughout the series and which really suits their personalities to form a believable relationship that's entertaining to read. A lot of conventional rules are purposefully broken to great effect on this page. From the midpoint down, the camera placement is constantly changing, but Elson is playing into that being inherently disorienting to make us, as readers, feel the same confusion as Sonic, who doesn't know where the sandworm will re-emerge from. This kind of approach is only possible when an artist knows the laws of comics as well as Richard does. My one criticism would be the final panel. If we want the sandworm to be intimidating, looming over Sonic, and we want to emphasise a size difference, we should shrink the heroes down, applying an appropriate degree of exaggeration. I'm admittedly nitpicking though, this is a near flawless page. Sonic is quick to take out the Badnik in a panel that highlights a few things for me. Elson actually draws Sonic curled up for the spin attack, rather than simply drawing a ball with a few spikes around the edges, and I appreciate that. It shows how that works and calls back to the game sprites, which flicker between a ball and a rotating curled up Sonic to sell the illusion. Second is how Richard sells the destruction of a Badnik. Cogs, nuts, and springs go flying in all directions, while the robot itself often goes cross-eyed. This is a comic after all. It's refreshing to see the artwork lean into that, rather than being ashamed of the format. Third is that Sonic's having a surprising amount of trouble with a single Badnik, considering what he fought in the Sonic 3 section, and what he'll go on to face later into this very arc. Knuckles shows some tolerance for Sonic, letting his guard down and actually bothering to ask why the Hedgehog is here, instead of immediately evicting him. Our Blue Boy is quick to retort that he doesn't want to be on the floating island, but someone decided to let Robotnik repair his Death Egg here. It turns out that Knuckles was just on his way to deal with that himself, with Sonic seemingly being genuinely concerned, saying, "Look, pal, the Death Egg is too..." I'm assuming he was going to say dangerous? This leads me to believe Sonic's here to do recon or perform sabotage, rather than attempting to destroy the downed satellite. But he's cut off by a voice off panel. I love Knuckles' shocked expression here. Seriously, this needs to be a Discord server emote or the internet's new shocked Pikachu face. It also shows Knuckles as having one single large eyeball, the same as Sonic, despite other expressions implying he has two separate eyes. We see further instances of this uniball later on in the story, but I can't think of any other notable instances in the rest of the comic's run. What do you think? Was this a mistake, or does Knuckles have one eyeball with two pupils in this universe? The things we end up saying with a straight face in this fandom. Anyway, they were cut off by Captain Plunder, who has the perfect line to describe my reaction. I'd think he weren't too pleased to see me. Now, baseless subjective preference and apologies in advance, I have never liked this character. I generally dislike pirates in media. I'm not sure what it is, but where everyone else sees pirates and says, "Yay!" I find myself groaning. I'm keeping that conscious bias in mind as I proceed here. Knuckles is frustrated that yet another person is trespassing on the floating island, but this also highlights a contrivance. Sonic just so happens to encounter two important characters back to back. He didn't plan to meet up with anyone, he outright told Tails he didn't want anyone slowing him down, yet here we are with a double dose of coincidence. I do like what Kitching does with this though. Plunder is here to rob Act 2's pyramid. There's story context instead of it just randomly rising out of the sands like it does in the game. We also get to see how Knuckles is warming up to Sonic. He immediately and firmly tells Plunder to leave, even if the captain completely ignores him. Compare that to how he greets Sonic. It's a much lighter and arguably jovial protest. He's even smiling as he approaches. That contrast subtly clues us in. We also have another minor writing grievance, as Sonic points out that he doesn't recognise the professor accompanying Plunder. He's told it's just a new member of the crew, but rather than letting Nigel off scot-free, it just draws attention to the problem. We've never seen Plunder's whole crew before, it's always been implied to be larger than we ever get to see. We don't know who is and isn't in it, so this explanation seems unwarranted and calls out something the audience may not have questioned otherwise. Also, side tangent, do all professors in this universe have comically large mustaches? Do they withhold your PhD until you've grown one? Back on point, the professor is successful in raising the Lost Pyramid, which turns out to have been right under Sonic's feet. My only observation here is the sense of scale. This is a massive towering pyramid that breaks the panel borders. We have an angle chosen to emphasise that and induce vertigo, but the size of the characters on the ground relative to Sonic breaks the illusion. He doesn't seem all that high up. Even so, it's an impressive shot to end the issue with. Issue 48 is less Sonic the comic and more Tomb Raider the comic, which is absolutely fine with me. This first panel serves as both a recap and an establishing shot, which is fairly common in serialized storytelling. After all, it has been 2 weeks since part 1, and the primary audience is children. Sonic's quick to point out that there's something behind the front door, although Plunder remains nonchalant. Out steps the Pyramid's Guardian, the game's Act 1 boss. He sports quite a different design here than he does in-game. Looking at the way this guy is drawn, especially the helmet and shoulder pads, it's apparent that STC's creative team have also worked on 2000 AD and Judge Dredd. Likewise, Robotnik's troopers. Very similar design sensibilities. I do question if Sonic really needed to speak here. We have a clear through line guiding our eyes across the page, and then this one speech bubble drags us away for a throwaway line that doesn't really add anything. Sonic's able to destroy the golem in a single attack, but, similar to the game's iteration, it reforms behind him. We get another reminder that this incarnation of the Hedgehog is just a tad too cocky and arrogant for his own good, as Knuckles tries to warn him, but it's played off as banter. The result is Sonic getting his face smashed to a pulp. How is he surviving that? Knuckles then shows us why he's the floating island's protector. He knows all about this foe and to lure it into the quicksand in a set of panels that directly translate the source material's gameplay. This is poles apart from the caution we saw in the Sonic 3 portion of this adaptation. It might also be how a young me learned how to defeat this boss. Once they're inside the pyramid, Sonic asks Knuckles why the stone giant didn't recognise him and tried to attack him, given Knuckles' role. It's a bloody good question! Knuckles responds, explaining it's an ancient defender who doesn't realise the floating island's inhabitants are long gone. To sidetrack and theorise for a moment, on our first reading we probably assume this to be referring to the lost Echidna tribe, Knuckles' ancestors. But if we compare the design of the tomb's protector with certain other sentinels in the series, and I use that word with purpose, alongside some of the other relics we see in other arcs, we realise this could be foreshadowing the Draken Empire. To be clear, I highly doubt that's the case. The Draken don't enter the story until issue 106. It's unlikely they were planned this early, and we've already noted that the Guardian and Troopers share patterns with 2000 AD characters. Old habits die hard. Chances are the Draken are a retcon in the truest sense of the full term, retroactive continuity. That's not a dirty word or inherently bad. Mangaka on weekly chapter deadlines with no idea how long their story would run for due to the constant threat of cancellation would often find seemingly insignificant objects and characters from previous chapters to then build new lore, events, and reveals around. It gave the illusion of a greater plan, as if they had sown those seeds from the start, and that method became part of some of the best long-running serialized stories ever told. While we can be confident issue 29's one-shot Sentinel was later positively retconned to become more important, these other instances might just be coincidences or me reaching for something that's not there. Add in the possibility Nigel was keeping Knuckles' backstory purposely vague, just in case the games ever did explain it, and the Echidna's line here being open to interpretation makes sense. Sorry, back to the issues we're talking about rather than events 60 issues and multiple storylines from there. The artwork on Sonic in this final panel feels more aligned with how Elson used to draw the Hedgehog. After sitting with it, I think the main cause is this line by his muzzle that implies a smaller, rounder face. If we remove just that one stroke, the shape of the entire face changes. When you're working with simple characters constructed of basic shapes, every single line counts. It can be surprising how much of a difference a small change can make. I also want to highlight the lighting and shading used throughout the remaining pages of the issue. As soon as the duo enter the pyramid, we start seeing heavier blocks of black to achieve higher levels of contrast. Then, once Plunder steals the treasure, ominous blue light gets brought in that dances around Sonic's face with a polished sheen. The entire next page is bathed in light blue, invoking a spooky and otherworldly atmosphere until we get the reveal of the ghosts from the game. Normal coloration resumes the moment Plunder escapes, showing the phenomenon has ended and we're back to the relative safety of normality. It's a great display of how careful colour use can completely change the tone of a scene. If you're wondering why I'm not focusing too much on the core story here, it's because there's not much to say this time. It's a fairly simple and throwaway tale. Plunder and the Professor steal the jewels, invoke the Ghost's curse, and then run away in fear. Meanwhile, Knuckles breaks a sand seal to submerge the pyramid before he and Sonic escape via a secret tunnel. It has very little impact on the overall plot, being less consequential than the supposedly skippable issue 45. I will say I enjoyed the gag across the bottom of the last 2 pages though. We see Plunder and Filch trying to get their story straight, increasing the ghost count from 3 to 50 and then 100. On the final page, we see them telling the crew they were surrounded by 200 evil spirits. Our 49th issue opens by ramping up the tension. We get an establishing shot of the Death Egg as Robotnik declares the repairs to be complete. The event Sonic and his friends feared is now a reality. The Maniac can't launch the satellite yet, as Grimer notes he still needs a power source. Ivo turns and instructs a shadowy figure to retrieve the Master Emerald. I love how this is handled, keeping Robotnik's servant just out of shot with only glimpses of his frame. It's a classic horror technique of only hinting at the monster until you absolutely have to show it, because we naturally fear the unknown and let our imaginations run wild, terrifying ourselves. While this is going on, Sonic and Knuckles arrive at the Lava Reef Zone. They're still clashing, but it's in a much friendlier tone now. The two are obviously and actively working together, with Knuckles even serving as a guide. There's a nice moment of anticipation as the two look upwards and we turn the page to reveal the Death Egg staring down at them. I love this page for so many reasons. The yellow eyes and their massive size dominate the page, screaming for our attention. It's like a predator observing their prey, specifically an owl. Everything about this page serves to visually communicate a power dynamic. The Death Egg has the high ground, with its cool steel contrasting with a visibly uncomfortable Sonic and Knuckles below. The heroes are on the edge of a pool of lava with nowhere to go. Even the way the light and heat of the magma interacts differently with Sonic's skin compared to the metal egg shows Robotnik to be more comfortable and in control right now. We can even draw a parallel between the nature of the Death Egg and the volcano, as we know that War Machine is no longer dormant, it's active. 10 out of 10, no notes. Even the title card ups the ante. This isn't the mystery of the Sandopolis zone anymore, no. Welcome to Countdown to Disaster. This ominous title helped make this stretch of the comic feel like a huge event. It also told us that things aren't going to go Sonic's way. That Death Egg is going to launch, and all we can do is read on. My only problem is that to have this, the previous page had to effectively contain 2 scenes. In an ideal world, that establishing shot would be bigger, we would have the chapter's title card and credits here, and the scene transition would be bumped to the next page. However, that greatly reduces the impact of the reveal, resulting in less emotional response and engagement from the reader, compromising the delivery. The team did only have 7 pages to play with here, and given the payoff, having 2 scenes on 1 sheet of paper is a small price to pay. I bring it up because I often see artists and writers forget to consider a comic as a whole. There's an easy trap to fall into of considering 1 page at a time and forgetting that it needs to interact with and lend itself to page turns, spreads, and the rest of the story's flow. It's something that Kitching and Elson clearly spoke about and considered here. For me, that's what makes this team a cut above most other creators. Knuckles is furious at Robotnik's desecration of his homeland, and this panel is so well done. The Death Egg is still in shot, and technically a lot of rules are being broken. You should not be able to get this angle if you consider where everything in the scene is relative to our viewpoint, but Richard's art is executed so well that we understand it to be representative and it still feels right. Our brains suspend our disbelief, and that's a really hard thing for an artist to achieve. Robotnik immediately goes on the attack as a legion of egg robos spill out of the Death Egg. Now, I praised Elson for implying a massive swarm of enemies while only drawing 4 or 5 in the Sonic 3 portion, but I couldn't put my finger on how he was doing it. This time, I think I can see through the magic trick. Let's break down the technique. Richard's playing with the visual design principles, including size, colour, contrast, emphasis, alignment, repetition, proximity, and white space. The second panel only contains 6 egg robos, yet it feels like more. We have a primary robot front and centre as our focal point. This tells us, without compromise, what we're looking at. This is important as 3 of his companions are purposefully cut off, hidden by the panel border. We have enough information to know what they are, yet not being able to see their full frame means we're also led to assume that others might exist out of shot as well. This is a belief that's reinforced by the preceding panel, which shows far more than 6 silhouettes. We can see their origin point, an open shaft on the Death Egg, making it feel like a clown car that more could spill out of. These egg robos are all different sizes, implying depth. We have obvious foregrounds, middle grounds, and backgrounds. Combine this with the aforementioned cutoffs, and it feels like we, as the readers, are caught in the middle of their formation. There's volume to this cloud of badness. Next, we have proximity and alignment. Notice how these egg robos aren't an equal distance from one another. They don't conform to a grid, they're not regimented or disciplined, there are no clear units or batches. Some are bunched close together, while others have more white space between them. This implies a busy centre mass with stragglers around the edges. It also invites chaos, which is fitting for an attack. Contrast comes into play in a few forms. Note that robots closer to the camera are more detailed than those drawn further away. That partly emulates how our vision works anyway. It saves Richard having to draw in colour quite so much, but it also lets us focus on this central robot while only registering his buddies in our peripheral vision. You cannot look at this and know there's 6 enemies. You have to consciously count it. In the next panel, contrast comes into play with only one egg robo actually being detailed. The rest are silhouettes, and again, there's more than 6, and their source is obfuscated so that we can't know how many there truly are. We're also being purposely confused by repetition. Egg robos all look the same anyway, but note how similar their poses are. With the exception of that 4th panel where only one has any amount of detail, no one's really calling attention to themselves. They are drones in many senses of the word. This purposeful lack of identity means that we can't follow any individual robot. We don't know if we're seeing the same one multiple times or a new one each time, so again the actual count becomes impossible to track. Richard Elson is a goddamn genius and a magician, and I'm sorry if I've broken the illusion for anyone. Even with everything I've picked up on here, I can guarantee he will watch this and then message me saying, "I did all of that, yes, but I also employed this other trick that you completely missed." Somehow I still have stuff I want to say about this page, but I'll try to keep it brief. We get a lovely and simple nickname for Knuckles here, with Sonic simply calling him Red. I love that as a sign of endearment, while still putting on a facade of distance. This speech balloon breaks a panel border. Why? What is it doing up here? Would have been such a crime to overlap some of Knuckles' dreadlocks. The talking egg robo scowls here. It's cartoony, it's befitting a comic, it's effective, but I find robots more intimidating when they can't break the laws of physics to emote. There's something about that cold, emotionless blank stare that deadly killer robots have, which just gives me chills, so I'm sad we don't get that here. And yeah, the egg robo is talking. Robotnik has assumed remote control, which is apparently a thing he can do. Sadly, I don't think they do anything with this. As far as I can remember, this ability never comes up again for the entirety of the comic's run, which is a shame. It had really awesome Metal Cooler or M. Bison energy. You can defeat as many bodies as you like, he just slips into another one. Weirdly, draws some parallels with Archie's Sonic Adventure adaptation, and I would not have known about that body-swapping Robotnik without Game Apologist speed reading, so yeah, go give Nick's channel a look. Alright, that's far too much time spent on a single page, and the next one is also, as I believe the kids would say, raw. We see Sonic taking out multiple egg robos, which retroactively makes the sandworm at the start of this story seem much deadlier. Knuckles calls out, saying he has a faster way though. This next panel, chef's kiss. Sonic is punching through an egg robo, which we get to view head on. We can see parts flying from his fist. There's a scowl and grimace on Sonic's face showing the effort he's putting into the swing, and a nice curve to the character that helps sell the motion, aided by windswept curved speed lines. That curvature also means we follow Sonic's form from the panel above and into the next as some great subconscious visual connective tissue. The only mark against it is that we can see Sonic's foot in the bottom right corner. This shows us he's running while striking, but removing this would instead imply he's standing firmly on the ground with a wide stance, grounding the hedgehog and pushing the impact of the blow even further. Like I said, this book is so good that I have to get incredibly specific to find any critiques. Despite Sonic exclaiming that nothing's faster than he is, his actions tell us something else. He stops to see what Knuckles is up to as a legion of egg robos close in on them. He trusts and respects the Echidna enough to actively cooperate with him. This is another spectacular panel that shows Elson has mastered crowds and overwhelming odds. Knuckles strikes the wall, releasing a stream of lava. Again, the layout and shapes here pick us up from the panel we were in and effortlessly deliver us to the next one. We can see this much more clearly if we silhouette it and look at the fundamental shapes involved. We come in through the lava stream, down the rock, and out through Knuckles. Aspiring comic artists, take notes. One downside is that while this does show Knuckles using his head, we don't get to focus on the results. The egg robos are left to melt in the background, while Knuckles gets a bad feeling and rushes away in the opposite direction of the Death Egg. Sonic and Knuckles race towards the Hidden Palace Zone. It took me a while to figure out why this panel felt awkward to me, and then it hit me. Sonic's pushing the same arm and leg forwards. Usually our arms and legs move in alternate directions when we run. That caused me to take a closer look at Knuckles' legs, where one is bending the wrong way, making it look broken. I've made another quick and sloppy edit, sorry Richard, to illustrate my point here. Moving Sonic's foot does make the panel feel less balanced, so maybe I should have swapped the arms instead. Actually, in hindsight, that may have been less work for me. Either way, we've successfully unbroken Knuckles' leg. We learned that the Emerald Chamber has been broken into. I think this is the first time that Elson's drawn Sonic's quills like this, and I very much appreciate the depth it adds. It's a great touch in an otherwise wonkily drawn page. More on that in a moment. Knuckles' suspicions were correct. The Master Emerald has been stolen. I always get a chuckle out of Sonic's sarcastic response here. Let's hear it for Knuckles! Fearless guardian of the Chaos Emeralds! Hey buddy, losing these things is getting to be a habit. It's kind of a shame that the Emerald Chamber is revealed in such a small space, especially as the Chaos Emeralds are now the Super Emeralds, something Sonic comments on. Knuckles explains this is a result of remerging the two sets. It's what they're supposed to look like. When they were split, they had been drained of most of their powers, kind of similar to Kami and Piccolo's situation in Dragon Ball. I think it's a fantastic way to incorporate this scene from the locked-on Sonic 3 and Knuckles, while recognising that the Emeralds already returned to their rightful place in the previous story, albeit at a seemingly different altar. Going back a panel, the Echidna explains that without the Master Emerald's power, the floating island will crash down to Mobius. Sonic's quick to offer his aid and reassurance, cementing this scene as when the duo truly start to trust each other. Knuckles has gone from believing Sonic to be a Chaos Emerald thief to now walking the Hedgehog straight into the Hidden Palace, arguably the most sacred place on the entire island. Sure, they still put on a show and take verbal shots at each other, but it's done with a knowing, friendly smile now. It's just a shame Uni-Eye Knuckles returns here and again directly below. The artwork for this page is fine, but it's not up to Richard's usual standards. We have posing errors, off-model characters, and an ineffective panel layout that places one of the most important reveals in one of the smallest spaces. The quality does pick back up again almost immediately, with one exception, so I wonder if Elson was feeling unwell when he drew this one. The next page shows Robotnik celebrating. It's an important and well-placed reminder as we've not seen our main antagonist for a while. We also get confirmation that, while the Master Emerald has been stolen, Ivo hasn't received it yet. It's still in transit, meaning there's still one last chance for our heroes to intercept it and prevent the launch. This page reinforces my idea that Elson might have been under the weather or up against a deadline, as there's an uncharacteristic lack of backgrounds here. Robotnik and Grimer largely exist inside of a white void, decades before Sonic Generations. Our final panel also looks familiar, being very similar to the final panel of issue 45. It's clearly a freshly drawn new take on the pose, but that reuse does imply an external pressure behind the scenes. I should clarify that's purely conjecture on my part. I don't know what the circumstances may have been. Thankfully, the final page of this issue is one of the best in the comics' history. Sonic and Knuckles spot a glowing light, following it to find Mecha Sonic, or Metalix as he's called here, absorbing energy from the Master Emerald a la his in-game fight with Knuckles. Look at this page! Bearing in mind this seems to have been coloured with alcohol-based markers, Elson still does a light source and gradient. He still executes green rim and bounce lights from the Master Emerald. His texture work not only helps the Master Emerald glow, it also imitates patterned glass, the kind we used to see on doors in the 80s and 90s. Mecha himself takes up the page in a powerful pose that screams, "Come at me." We're again using simple positioning with a slightly tilted angle to visually convey power dynamics. Sonic isn't just visibly upset to encounter a Metalix, he verbalizes those fears, this mechanical doppelganger is treated with the utmost respect in this book. This final page made the 2-week wait for issue 50 absolutely agonizing. It was something you wanted to skip school to read, and oh boy, did it deliver. In fact, let's get meta and have you experience that wait for yourself. Unless you're, watching this in the future and can jump straight to part 2. I have too much to say about this arc for one video, so look out for part 2 in the very near future. I'm actively working on it right now, with a script that continues to somehow say an average 2,000 words per 7-page part of the story. Things get pretty crazy, so you won't want to miss it. Subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when it goes live. In the meantime, I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters who are Crow, Tiny Jericho, Mr. Terry Chaos, Ducky Go, Francis T218, and Deliverator. You can join them for perks such as pre-release video scripts in the link in the description. While you're waiting, if you've enjoyed this video, there's a bunch of other Sonic comic content you're sure to enjoy, so allow me to give some shoutouts and make some recommendations. First off, we have Dan200, who is doing an amazing job of restoring every page of Sonic the Comic. We've been seeing his work throughout this video. His hope is to convince the relevant rights holders to reprint Sonic the Comic in collected volumes. Let's hope he's successful, as these comics haven't been available to purchase for over 20 years now. Next, we have Sonic the Comic the podcast. They review one issue of STC per 2-hour show, with loads of brilliant nostalgic tangents about growing up in Britain in the 90s. They also have an amazing Discord community full of good eggs. Then there's the Game Apologist speed reading series, which focuses on the current IDW run of Sonic comics as well as the Archie books. I didn't know the US had a different comic to us until I stumbled across the infamous issue 150 at my local comic shop. I immediately added that series to my pull list and read through to its sudden cancellation. Nick's videos have been great at helping me fill a massive knowledge gap, giving me an appetite to go back and read those first 149 issues that I missed out on. Finally, we have Johnny Vector, who has done several videos on Sonic the Comic's major arcs and characters. He provides a great overview of STC's homegrown rogues gallery, including the Brotherhood of Metallics, Commander Brutus, and Dr. Zachary. For now, I'll see you back here shortly for the conclusion to this epic saga.